Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking a look at some programs across the country and talking about what the best case scenario is heading into 2023. This is peak offseason. You're drinking the Kool-Aid. Nothing bad has happened yet. We'll talk about that when it does. But when you're talking offseason, you're talking about what can these teams be in 2023. We're going to Lincoln, Nebraska, talking some Nebraska football. Now, before we get into it, two things. One, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's been a blast talking Nebraska football this offseason. The fans, the Cornhusker fans, we always say it. You're like some of the best fans in the country. We've been to a game in Lincoln. You guys have been showing a ton of support. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And the second thing, this is a Kool-Aid drinking podcast. If you want to hear a more in-depth analysis on our takes on these position groups and what this team will look like, go check out our Summer Scout, and I'll link that in the bio or in the comment section, whatever you call that. But Dill, I'm going to take this one off to you. Now, I want to ask you, what is the best case scenario for Nebraska in 2023, year one under Matt Rhule?
I mean, this team 100% can win a Big Ten West.
Yeah,
100%. You go back to me 12 months ago, I was picking this team confidently, like this team's going to roll the Big Ten West. There's no one can touch them. I think bringing in a guy like Matt Rhule, who, again, if they just play like typical games of good 60-minute football without making tragic mistakes, this is a team that can 100% beat anyone in the Big Ten West. They're frankly returning a lot from those talented teams. I think this team, again, if Matt Rhule coaches up to what we think he can be as a college coach, this is a Big Ten West contender.
The boys were drinking Kool-Aid 12 months ago, drinking it right now. And I think you started at the right point. Now, I have a reason on the offense. So we're going to give a reason on the offense. We're going to give a reason on the defense. And we're going to take a look at that schedule, which I think is very gettable for Nebraska. The overarching reason why I think I'm like, if this 2023 and they win the Big Ten West, which I completely agree. I don't know if they're beating Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State from the East, but if they do win the Big Ten West and they kind of roll some of these teams, I think the number one reason is the winning culture that Matt Rhule is going to bring to this program. And you take a look under Scott Frost, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse. Nebraska fans probably tired of hearing this, but this team just didn't know how to win football games late. And whenever the game was close, it seemed like Nebraska just didn't make the play to win the football game. Matt Rhule, you take a look at his track record, not counting the NFL, at Temple, with significantly under-talented teams, won games. He goes to Baylor, not as talented teams as some of the other teams in the Big 12, wins games. He goes to Nebraska, and if he can bring that winning culture, that culture where, hey, it is a close game, we're going to go out and make that play to win, the attention to detail, that's the first thing you're talking about for Nebraska reaching their 2023 ceiling, which is winning the Big Ten West.
And that's 100%. But and just to get into my reason on offense, I think it's this offensive line.
Attention to detail.
We've been talking about it for a long time. Like these guys, they're young, they're talented. Give them a break, obviously, and play great in a couple of years past. Now it's time to show up.
Yeah.
Like these guys have been playing a lot of football across the board, all of them. Experience, getting Newly back, getting Ben Scott in the portal. You have a team up front that's talented enough to play. They got to give Jeff Sims in this offense a chance, unlike what I think they gave Casey Thompson. They just didn't give him a shot to win games.
Yeah, and going back to the rebuild like storyline that the national media likes to make for Nebraska, like this group, in terms of like these guys coming out of high school, a lot of these guys are really coveted. Like Turner Cochran was a top 50 national dude coming out of high school. These guys are talented. Now it's, can we put it together? I don't have a question of these dudes have it. I think they have it. You just got to get developed, and you've heard attention to detail, playing disciplined football over and over and over from Matt Rhule in those press conferences. That's where I think it needs to start with the offensive line. Now,
and this is a very good unit that I think, along with what actually looks like a very good group of skill guys, I think this team can win a lot of games because this unit, I think, can be one of the better in the conference if they play really good.
Yeah. Now, my reason on the offense side of the ball, it's Jeff Sims and him. I'm so high. Jeff Sims is arguably the most talented quarterback in the Big Ten. I mean, this is podcast brought to you by Kool-Aid right now. Like, you have J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. Outside of that, like Jeff Sims with the size and athleticism and how dynamic he is with the football in his hands running it, with how big his arm is. Still, I remember as a true freshman watching Georgia Tech football, him and Jahmyr Gibbs, we looked at each other and said, Georgia Tech's back. Like, Georgia Tech is going to get rebuilt. Now, he had a horrible situation. That team is coming from the triple option. They barely have a wide receiver on their roster. And Jeff Sims is flashing some serious talent. He comes to Nebraska, and if he can be that guy I think he can be, that's about my biggest question mark. If Nebraska reaches their best case scenario, Jeff Sims is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten.
He's probably got to be the best in the Big Ten West, I think, if this team's going to make it and be that team. Because, again, it's – and you're right. He's got the situation to do it. Like, he's 100%. Never played with any talent. You look – if some of these tight ends work at Nebraska, it could be really good. If a guy like Malachi Coleman steps up and gives them a deep threat, he could be really good. And then they have a running game. So this team, I think, is kind of positioned to give Jeff Sims a shot to kind of be that guy we thought he'd be at Georgia Tech when it's just that team never ended up developing with him. He kind of left him in the
and I really like what Coach Sad is going to try to do. Like a lot of 12 personnel. And that, I mean, you could say another reason is they might have the two, like one of the best tight enders in the country, if Fedone and Eric Gilbert. Eric Gilbert gets the waiver from the NCAA, which is absolutely insane that we don't know what the deal is with that. But for Thomas Fedone and Eric Gilbert are two of the better tight end groups or tight end duos in the country.
Talent, at least.
Satterfield, yeah, 100%. And we're talking about best case scenario. Like those guys, Eric Gilbert was compared to, he was going to be the next Travis Kelce coming out of high school. And so you pair that up with Coach Satterfield running the 12 personnel, making it easier on Jeff Sims, establishing a run game, working off play action. I really do think, I kind of echo what you said. Jeff Sims is going to have a situation where he can really go out and ball out because the skill position around him is good. I like the scheme fit. This is a Nebraska offense that could be really special. And Dill, I think I'm more excited about the defense because if you guys have been listening to me talk Nebraska all summer, like I probably said Tony White 100,000 times. Dill, Tony White coming in as the defense coordinator is one of the best coordinator hires in the country. I'm going to ask you your reason on the defensive side of the ball for Nebraska reaching that best case scenario.
My thinking is can this front seven fit in with what Tony White, like, can it come together? Because you look at what they did in the transfer portal, getting guys like Chief Borders and MJ Sherman, who are carbon cutouts of what I think Tony wants. Guys who can play different positions, can rush the passer, can drop in coverage. That's what Tony White wants to do. He wants to create chaos with his front. And I just feel like they have some of the guys they got in the portal and some of these young guys like kind of fit that scheme and I think can be really dangerous in what he wants to do.
Yeah, and even Elijah Judy coming from A&M, like a guy that can play like the nose, he can play the 5. Like he can do all sorts of things, and that's what you're going to see Tony White do. Like you're not going to see that standard defense. You're going to see all sorts of different looks, and to have all sorts of different looks, you got to have players that can do all sorts of kind of things. And guys like MJ Sherman, Chief Borders, Elijah Judy certainly do that. And then the shout out to true freshmen. We've been giving them love in the freshman spotlight. Prince Will and Cam Lenhart. Like, they're going to do their thing. They're special. We watch this.
And that's what you're kind of looking for. Like, I wouldn't say you have a ton of proven guys on this front, at least defensive line, linebacker kind of play. So they're going to need to, like, show it. But, again, talented, fit the scheme. And if they can just develop into what Tony White kind of – it almost feels like the dream kind of players for him and his defense. It's got the potential, I think, to be really dangerous in a unit that, frankly, for the last couple of years has been very disappointing, I think, for the most part.
100%.
Haven't played
yeah, like, and I always like O'Shawn Mathis coming over from TCU. Like, I was excited about this group. And outside of, like, Garrett Nelson, like, nobody really reached that potential. Caleb Tanner, O'Shawn Mathis. Like, those were guys that weren't difference makers. If Prince Will, Cam Lenhart, MJ Sherman, Chief Borders, Elijah Judy can be those difference makers, I do like Nash Hutchmeyer and Ty Robinson in the middle. Like, this is a group that in the front seven, Tony White's going to have a field day. My reason on the defense side of the ball is I got two reasons. I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to quickly talk about the linebackers. Like, because especially in the Big Ten West, like, you're going to have to hold up in the run game. And I want to talk about the secondary. That's absolutely elite. But I look across the Big Ten West, like, I don't see many teams that are going to be challenging you vertically down the field. That's going to be a lockdown group. Dill, you're going to go play Iowa. You're going to play Wisconsin. You're going to play Illinois. Those teams are going to want to run the football. If Luke Reimer and Nick Henrich can get back to being those all Big 12 or Big 10 linebackers that they can be, I think that's the key because we saw those guys in 2021 be some dudes, and they kind of faded in 2022.
Yeah, and that'll be the thing. Can they even, like, be a little creative? It feels like they lined up. They played that base 4-3. It was a very boring, dry scheme. It felt like linemen were on both of them constantly. I'm kind of like, can Tony White put them in a better spot to succeed? I mean, these are two very athletic, very instinctual players. can they get a little more space and breathing room to operate and go do their thing and make some negative plays and rack up some tackles? Because you're right, they need to come back and play the way they played in 21 when we were like, man, this is a linebacker duo that rival anyone in the country.
Yeah, and that you made a really good point. As much as like you want to get on those guys for maybe not performing 2022, like that defensive line wasn't doing them any favors. Like they weren't playing clean. I know they were battling injuries too, but if that D line can step up a little bit, like I really do think those linebackers can have a field day. And you got to touch on the secondary. Like I don't, the Big Ten West ain't gonna like push you much in terms of pushing the ball downfield. That being said, this
Just
secondary,
stick the four of them back there, and you don't need to think.
That's what I'm saying. Like you could go like just single high safety, put everyone in the box. Like I love these cornerbacks. I like this safeties. Still, this secondary, outside.
You got 3 pros, 100%. I think Hartzog, Buford, Newsome, all pros.
And dude, even a guy like Tommy Hill, I think is good. Like that's
when you have that much pro talent, you just need to. This will be such a good unit, I think.
And I think that's going to allow Nebraska and specifically Tony White to get creative with that front seven. Like send some blitzes. Like those guys can hold up on their own.
That's what it like. Almost you're just like, why it felt so stale. It's like Tony White's going to be coming in. We think he has the players to do it. Just do something exciting, like get the blood flow, the blood running red, like that YouTube video.
gas
video. So sick.
Ask Cade to push the ball down the field. Go bring some blitzes and say, Cade, hey, push him down the field on our secondary. We're not gonna slander Cade too much, but challenge him. Challenge Cade McNamara to do it and see what happens. I think you'll like the results. Now, the other key to this, Dale, is the Big Ten. This is a really good schedule. And you talk about Nebraska, and I guess I'll ask you this question. Nebraska plays their best ball. Like when all these things that we just talked about coming together, who's beating them on this schedule outside of Michigan Saturday, September 30th?
There's no team I'm penciling in to beat Nebraska. If they're like looking like, oh man, Jeff Sims is playing really good and they're playing physical and they're playing good defense.
And your head coach doesn't look like he's a wounded animal on the sideline when it gets close.
Yeah, you're like thinking like I don't think any of these teams want to see Nebraska. It's like I think Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, like they're good teams for sure.
That's my thing. And we'll get into the Big Ten West is like Illinois is my pick to win the Big Ten West right now because I think they have like where they need to be good. I think they're good enough. Like they have a dominant offensive line, a dominant front seven. That's going to win.
It's like dramatically lower than Nebraska.
Exactly. And so we're talking about Nebraska reaching that ceiling. I don't think Illinois can beat them. The team I would maybe be like on the road at Wisconsin. That'll be a tough one.
Dangerous because they're a team again. If they reach their ceiling and can throw it a little bit, yeah, they're dangerous too. But those are the 2 teams I'm kind of looking at have the firepower to really kind of rise above this like fray that is the Big Ten West where everyone feels like they're equal.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And so you talk about the wild Big Ten West. We've talked about it a lot. There's a lot of teams that could. I think there's 4 or 5 teams that could win the Big Ten West. Legitimately, it's gonna be a wild year in the Big Ten West.
But no one's got the ceiling of Nebraska, Wisconsin. They're the 2 high.
I think that's where I'm at. So Nebraska, to sum it up, 2023 best case scenario for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, I would be expecting playing Indy, winning a Big Ten West. And again, I don't think we're there to say we're going to do some other best case scenarios where we're going to get sicko mode. Like I've already said, Texas A&M best case scenario is winning an Natty title with how talented that team is. I don't. I do. Now, Nebraska in a couple of years, we're talking best case scenario. We're talking about ideally if Matt Rhule does what we think he's going to do is winning a Big Ten championship. This year, I think we're still kind of building, but this is a team that this ain't no rebuild. This is a team that can compete in the Big Ten. It can go on and win the Big Ten West. That's where we'll sum it up. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Hope you all enjoyed the little Kool-Aid session before the season actually starts. The bullets start flying, and we have to talk about the bad news. Appreciate y'all. We'll talk to you guys later. Peace.